Welcome to Bots and Beyond, your weekly dose of all things automation, mixing up end user, vendor, and consultant experience to create your go-to podcast for bot-related insights. I am your host, Wayne Butterfield.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bots and Beyond. Another great episode, another fantastic guest lined up for you this week. This time I've gone stateside, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Sam Best from GM Financial on this week's episode. So, hi, Sam.
Hi, Wayne. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, pleasure is all mine, and I'm sure it will be the audience's as well as we kind of get into today's topic. I guess I know a little bit about yourself, having had a number of conversations, but it would be fantastic for the audience to learn a little bit more about you. And as is the usual intro with our guests here, if you can just tell us who you are, what you do, and obviously why you do it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So my name is Sam Best. I lead the business automation team here at GM Financial. And what we do is we use technology to automate manual processes across the global business. Why I do it, as long as I can remember, I've always liked to improve things, make things better. And I think this is just a natural extension of that. Technology affords us the opportunity to work in a more efficient way like never before. So that's why I really enjoy doing that here.
Great. And I think we probably have similar desires around that, using technology to improve things. So that definitely resonates with me. One quick question I had, you mentioned GM Financial. Now, GM, General Motors, I would presume, aware of them, not necessarily on the financial part. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about what GM Financial do and kind of what the business is?
Yes, exactly. So the GM and GM Financial does stand for General Motors, and GM Financial, we are the fully owned captive of General Motors. So you can just see it as that we are General Motors auto finance arm.
Okay, and you said global. So again, I guess you've kind of got full coverage around the globe. Okay, so that makes some sense. One of the topics that came up when we were having our pre-discussion that I think is really is a really interesting one, and be good to kind of get your take on it, is for many who have listened, they will have heard of citizen developer, but actually the topic that we're talking about today is citizen innovation. Now, for many, including myself, actually, when we first started talking, this was kind of new. I love new because it means I'm learning something new. I'm gaining new insight. Like, what exactly is citizen innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question I get asked quite a bit because to your point, Wayne, I think people automatically go towards citizen development, which is part of citizen innovation, but think of citizen innovation as a much more broad sense. So really, what I look at citizen innovation as, it's how we equip and empower our employees to innovate right where they're at. So for example, it could be some citizen development component. It could be teaching and equipping and empowering people to build their own RPA bots. It could be teaching data skills and how can we look at data and then visualize it in a meaningful way. It could be designing processes and workflows, traditional Lean Six Sigma process improvement type work. So all of those different skills, technology components really roll up into citizen innovation and teaching folks to be innovative right where they're at.
It's like, I guess, as you say, kind of citizen development, just one part of that. And then there's this kind of these other components. Like, where did this come from? Is this a GM Financial only thing? Is this something that you kind of picked up on your previous travels? Like, how did this come about?
Yeah, I would say a couple different things. So first, being here at GM Financial, just so everyone has some context, we started our automation journey a little over 2 years ago. Our first automation went into production in February 2019. Since then, we've deployed about 60 automated solutions, automated around 5 million transactions that people were having to do those transactions, and now they don't have to do that. So really the genesis of this is, we're doing this with professional resources, working with business partners. We're only going to unlock so much innovation. Obviously, the team's done a great job and made a lot of progress, but how much more progress could be made is if we keep that model However, we democratize some of these technology skill sets, some of these methodologies that we talked about to folks who are actually performing the processes and doing the work. So that's where the genesis of this really came from. Again, we're only going to unlock so much innovation doing this the way we've been doing it. So how do we add this second delivery stream to really embed innovation throughout the entire enterprise? I will say another thing, the second point of this is when you think about empowering folks with these types of skill sets, it really does create a more equitable future for our employees. There's a great article by Microsoft CEO that came out almost a year ago. I think it was around September, October timeframe of last year. Would encourage everybody to check it out if you haven't read it, that talked about democratizing technology and skill sets. It creates a more equitable future and gives folks who maybe didn't have those opportunities or didn't have those skill sets or training, it really does afford them those opportunities where they can learn something new and do something different than they were before. So those are really the main two drivers of why we're doing this here at Key Financial.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love the paper. What we'll do is see whether or not we can get a link to the paper kind of in the show notes here, because I think it's definitely, as you say, something worthwhile in people being aware of that and maybe giving it a read as well. It's certainly influenced, obviously, the kind of work that you're doing here. So certainly worth the read. I guess I'm keen to understand that. I mean, with something being, let's say, pretty cutting edge, right? We're not talking about citizen developer, which most of the people are. Then there must be kind of some gone well, some not gone wells to date. It'd be really good to kind of tap in, like, what have you learned? And what would you do again the same? What really would you be doing differently? Really great to get your kind of insights in all of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, with anything new, there are going to be bumps and bruises as well as good things along the way. So I'd be happy to share. I would say the first thing that's gone well is that people are really excited to learn. People want to be equipped with technology and methodologies to be able to solve problems and improve and to innovate right where they're at. That's, I would say, the desire of most of the folks that we've worked with, which is really encouraging to see. Another cool thing is that what's gone well is that we're able to solve pain points or business problems that we weren't able to solve before. So what I mean by that is that maybe this problem, it's causing an issue or causing a little bit of friction within the business. However, maybe the return of actually solving that problem with professional resources, kind of what we talked about earlier, other folks innovating for other people, we would never get the financial ROI on that. So the cool thing about this is it lowers that bar and it now enables processes and pain points to be solved that weren't previously to be able to be solved for. So I would say those two things we're really encouraged by are going well. I'd say what there's an area to improve on, and that's these folks who are learning these new skill sets, learning these new technologies, having enough time to not only just learn, but then actually embed it into their daily workload. So you have to think this is cultural, right? Anytime you're taking innovation and you're driving that through all layers of the organization, and you want to make it pervasive across your enterprise, that requires a cultural shift. And yes, people do have a desire to do this, but also, people do have a lot of work on their plate. So really, it's kind of a cultural shift, and a cultural component is how can we kind of prioritize some time to innovate, right? Obviously, that's not going to be 100% of their job when you talk about citizen innovation, but how do we carve out a slice of their time to be able to put into this? Because it really is going to pay dividends in their operations and what they're doing on a daily basis.
Great. And you kind of mentioned culture there and creating the right type of culture for this to work, right? And, as we know, culture can both positively and negatively affect any initiative, really, especially automation and major change. Culture, again, kind of leads me on to employee. Your culture generally geared around employees. What's their kind of feedback been on this? Because again, any change is not necessarily easy. Employees have probably gone through quite a significant amount of change as a result of COVID anyway, and then we kind of throw citizen innovation in there. Like, talk to us a little bit about what their view of the world is. I think you kind of said there was certainly some positive noises coming from the employees, but give us a bit more detail on that.
You're absolutely right. The last 18 months, to describe it as change would definitely be an understatement given what's going on in the world. But right, this is a change component. And I will say looking at kind of the feedback, just like what we did with what's gone well, maybe what's not gone so well, kind of look at some positive and maybe some other type of feedback is, again, folks are really positive about this in the sense that, they're raising their hand saying, hey, we have these problems, we could innovate, we could make things better. We just need X, Y, and Z to be able to do that. So I really am getting a lot of feedback around, people wanting to be independent, to be able to solve their own problems, which is great. I would say some other feedback that we've received is that, especially when you talk about, RPA and building their own bots, which is really where we're driving the Citizen Innovation Program at first. There have been some slow adopters, maybe because the technology barrier to entry, although it's way less than traditional software development, it still may be high for some folks. Actually thinking a process and automating it might be a little bit difficult because it may take a little longer. There might be some listeners out here that either they themselves feel this way or maybe they have folks on their team. So I'd like to take maybe just a brief moment to share a personal story because I was in the same boat about 7 or 8 years ago whenever I started building RPA bots back then. And I remember going to a beginner class and everything went right over my head. It was very difficult to grasp. I was actually in there with traditional software developers. They were just picking it up super quick. And I kind of felt like, wow, these guys are getting it really fast and I'm not at all, right? This just isn't for me. And I remember about a month went by and there was an intermediate class coming up. And I'm like, there's no way I'm taking that, right? I barely survived the first one. This one, I'm not going to be a glutton for punishment. But I remember somebody at the time, they encouraged me, they supported me and said, hey, I want you to go, I'll help you, you'll be fine, we'll answer any questions. And when I went to that class, that's where it clicked. And that's where I started getting the concepts and really understanding it. And since then, I've been involved with hundreds of automation projects, either developing them, either teaching people, actually doing implementation. So I just want to encourage everybody who's listening to this, if you do have folks that may be slow starters, so to speak, and I use that with quotations that you can't see, really take the opportunity to try to mentor them, one-on-one them, because I can honestly say that if somebody wouldn't have taken that opportunity with me early on, I wouldn't have had the career that I did today. So that is some feedback that we've gotten here. I assume some other folks are getting that at other places. So I just wanted to share that story just to encourage folks because it will pay off in the end.
Excellent. No, I think that's admirable and obviously great to hear that type of feedback. And of course, throwing a personal story in the mix is always very helpful. Cool. I mean, I can absolutely see this working well in the right organization, and I think it's great to give people these skills, multiple different skills, in order to really try and own their own destiny. And I love the fact that actually the concept is research backed. If you kind of reread the Microsoft paper on this and giving people, not just a technology, but methodologies in order to make sure that they're using those technologies in the right way. So I think I'm sold on the concept here. If you were to start again, though, lessons learned, what would be your kind of tips now for anybody who's saying, right, actually, do you know what, we've got citizen developer, but actually it's not really delivering for us. It's citizen innovation that we need. What would be your kind of lessons learned, top tips for anyone who's thinking about their own citizen innovation program?
anytime I think about kind of a new capability or doing something new, I always think of it in the traditional lens of people, process, and technology. So maybe I can provide some lessons learned around those three components. I will say first, process is you need to have not just a plan and a strategy on, what you're going to include in citizen innovation, how you're going to roll that out, but also a framework on how, if you're using technology specifically, on how things are going to get automated or things are going to be improved. Because anytime you start talking about, democratizing technology outside of traditional software developers, there's probably going to be questions from your audit group, your privacy group, your cyber group. How are you managing data? How are you managing access and credentials and things along those lines? So it's really important to document a process, document a framework, really bring your internal partners along with you and agree to, hey, this is how our citizen innovation process is going to work. Next, from a technology lens, when you think about citizen innovation, you can have the coolest technology in the world, but if people don't use it, it really doesn't matter, right? So we have to think about that component that, we're working with traditional non-technical folks. They probably have some great basic digital skills, but probably haven't done traditional software development. So let's come up with some technology where that technical barrier to entry is a lot lower and where it can be seamless and easy for a non-technical user to pick up and start implementing right where they're at. And then finally, around people, again, people are at the center of every type of change or any type of initiative that we do here and that folks around the world do as well. So let's remember that we need to put support systems in place, whether that's training. It's not just enough just to roll out a technology tool. You have to teach people how to do it. Then you have to mentor them, and then you have to support them, and you really have to provide that people support to make this successful. So don't forget about your people as well. So Wayne, from people, process, and technology, those would be our biggest lessons learned, and that's what I would advise other folks to just keep in mind before they start down this journey.
Absolutely. I guess the key one there obviously is people, and you can't ever underestimate the amount of focus you need to put on them. And I guess it's continued focus as well, isn't it? Because there's potentially quite a lot of aspects that you're talking about here as part of citizen innovation. It's not just learning a tool. It's learning a tool. It's obviously understanding business process. It's different methodologies around understanding process, improving process. There's quite a lot there, isn't there? So, you're giving people all of these tools, which is fantastic. But obviously, and I guess, this is the kind of longevity of all of this. It's not just giving them the tools and then, hey, great, crack on. It's, as I've certainly seen before with like process improvement, Lean Six Sigma, etc. It's a way of working, right? And I often class automation and automation programs. This is not just a technology. This is changing the way that you work, and that is not just a switch that you flick. And I guess that's obviously one of the reasons why this is a way of working. Citizen innovation is not an initiative. It is changing the way that your people deal with and think about work moving forward. And that really is a huge cultural shift. And obviously you've done, let's say, lots so far. I'm sure there's still more to go at, but kind of what's next for the program?
Yeah, great question. So we are just getting started on the journey here. There's so much more to do. I think specifically for GM Financial, when you think about some new technology tools that are available, they're radically different than versions from 10, 20 years ago that everyone's used to. So for example, you think about Office 365, the Power Platform is very different than using Microsoft Word. So, when I look at, ubiquitous technology like Microsoft that I'm sure a lot of folks have deployed in their organization, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think there's opportunity with, again, methodologies and not just technology being the only solution, but how can we get people to think about their business differently, drive out waste, be more efficient? How can we constantly be looking for opportunities to improve?
Excellent. Okay, really useful to hear that. I'm sure the audience will would have many questions had this have been a live audience debate. But if you do have any questions for Sam, I'm sure I'd be quite happy to answer them. If I obviously he'll be linked in the promotion of the episode, etc. on LinkedIn. So if you've got any questions for Sam, feel free to reach out. Sam, absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Really, really interesting topic. I love, as I said right at the beginning, I love talking about anything new. Because it's always creates new insight and new ways of working, even making use of some, what we now class as kind of older technology, if you can class RPA still as old, but a new way of thinking about how to deliver value through automation. So really appreciate your time. I'm sure the audience will appreciate your insight as well. So thank you.
It was my pleasure, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, the listeners, for listening to Bots and Beyond this week. And we'll speak to you again in the next episode.